Hey, welcome back to American Lifestyle, and today we're going to be turning this into something like this. Alright, so this video is obviously going to be about how to mount a deer skull, deer head. A lot of people call it a European mount. Basically, it'll just sit up on a plaque like this, and it'll look pretty on your wall. Yeah, so let's get started. The first step is obviously you got to kill a buck somehow, some way. Hit it with your car, shoot it. Friend shoots it. Friend hits it with their car, which is what happened here. One of my wife's friends hit this giant with their car, and they wanted me to skull mount it because I said I'd skull mount it for them because they gave us all the meat. This is that buck that I was talking about that we got 123 pounds of meat out of. This guy was big, and if I would have hit him with my car, I might have actually shoulder mounted him, but it's not mine, so it's alright. Anyway, second step, we have to get all this fur off, the ears, as much of the meat as possible before we boil it. But honestly, I've been trying to get to this for a couple weeks now, and this head's been thawed and frozen and thawed and frozen and thawed and frozen, so it kind of stinks. So I'm probably just going to get the fur off if I can, then I'm going to start boiling it, but we'll see what we can get out of it before I have to put it in that pot over there. Let's go. Alright, so we have most of the hide off. There is a little bit of hide right here up by the antlers. It got a little bit dried out up there, so we're just going to let that boil out. I did notice a couple things about the mount that are wrong. Right about here at the base, it broke off probably when it got hit, because there's no pieces. I haven't seen any pieces. And there's also teeth right here that are broken on the top where we're actually going to mount. So hopefully I can try and super glue those later on. But for right now, we're just going to try and get all this neck meat off and this vertebrae right here. And then we're going to get to a point where all we have to do is take this bottom jaw and just hyperextend it and pop it off. And then we're ready to boil. Alright, so let's get back at it. Alright, so we ended up getting the jaw off. The jaw was actually snapped in half, so it was a little harder to get off than normal. I couldn't just pry it off. As you see, I tried, but I ended up having to cut the other part off and actually snap the jaw again near this thin piece up here and about right there. So there's about this much jaw still in there somewhere, but it'll come off when it boils. So we're gonna go ahead and start the boiling process. Okay, the antlers are holding it in place about where I want it to be. I just have to add a little bit more water to get it up and over that skull. We want to try to keep as much of the antlers out as possible, but we want to make sure that all the meat and tissue gets cooked off. I did put somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 cup of Dawn dish soap in with the water. That helps all the oils and whatnot that are in the deer and the skin, the hide, from staining the skull. Helps draw it out. Alright, so now the water level's where we want it to be. Now we just need to let it boil for about 1.5 hours, 2 hours, if not a little bit longer. So I'll probably end up picking this up tomorrow, which is like a blink of an eye for you guys, but I have to go to work about when this is ready to get sprayed off. So tomorrow we're going to go ahead and spray it off with the power hose, and we'll go from there. Alright, so it's the next day. I still have it in the pot. I left it here overnight, that way it'd stay moist and wouldn't dry to the bone. And I heated it up this morning and helped loosen some stuff up. Then I went ahead, started pulling a bunch of the meat and tissue off. Still got to pull some out of the nose cavity. A lot of that'll get sprayed out. Took the eyeballs out, as well as some of the brain matter. I didn't get all of it because, I mean, you can only get so much. I went ahead and used an old coat hanger, and then I twisted it up, made a little loop at the end, that way I could try to dig in there and pull some stuff out. It worked pretty well, but we also have this hole right here. I don't know what exactly it's from. I don't really see that being part of it getting hit, because it's too round, and this part of the skull right here is pretty thick. So what I'm thinking is this is where the police officer dispatched the animal, although I don't remember seeing any holes in the hide. But we'll see if we find any bullet fragmentations or whatnot. So we may or may not be able to recover bone for that, depending on if it was shot or if that's just how it busted out. But it's really too round to be a coincidence from it getting hit. So we'll see what happens. We're gonna go ahead, well, I'm gonna go ahead and take this outside and spray it down. Alright, so it's day 3. I wasn't able to do anything yesterday because I had to let my hose thaw out. It's thawed now, so we're able to pressure wash it. But before that, I gotta show you these. I was going through all the trimmings yesterday, and I found these bullet fragmentations. So that hole in the back of the skull is indeed a hole from where the police officer dispatched the animal. But so now that we got that covered, let's go ahead and go pressure wash this deer. Alright, so when doing this, the main portions we want to go for are this nasal cavity right here. If you go in through the back, it's easier to flush it out through the front. You don't want to break these nasal bones right here. And then the skull, the brain cavity. Those are the 2 main spots. Then the rest you just want to kind of hit over as best as you can. Try not to dislodge anything. Some of this stuff is getting really weak and it's spreading, so we gotta try to minimize that. We're gonna super glue that later, but let's see how much we can get cleaned up. There's a lot of gunk still in the nasal cavity, if you can see. We're gonna try to hit these back holes here. I have the availability with my pressure washer to soak it down with some soap, so we're gonna go ahead and do that. Maybe loosen some stuff up. Soap water in there. With this, you don't want to use the most narrow tip you have, so something like a 25 or 15 degree start out with at least, just to try to loosen stuff up. That way you don't destroy the inside. Alright, so we got it pretty good. If there's more in there, we're just gonna have to either pull this inner nostril piece out. The only reason I have that on my old deer skull is because it was left out and nature got rid of all that stuff, so that left them there. Most people do go ahead and they take pliers and they remove those inner nostril pieces. It doesn't really matter if you have those or not. It doesn't really affect the look of it any, unless you look down the nose. But I'm going to try to preserve those. If I can't, well, I guess I can't. So, we're going to go ahead, take a closer look inside, and we might end up going on to the bleaching process. Now that we went ahead and power washed the skull and got all the tissue off, I don't really see anything inside of there. I mean, there could be a little bit of remnants, but once it dries up and we put some mop and blow on there, it'll seal all up. So we don't have to worry about that. It's not going to stink at all. To bleach it, we're going to go ahead and put a gallon of hydrogen peroxide inside of this stock pot, and we're going to fill it up to the base where we had it before. If not a little bit lower, we're going to try to keep it off of the antlers as much as possible in order to help protect the antlers from getting bleached as well. We will put saran wrap and duct tape around it and make it as tight as we can. That way we can avoid getting the antlers bleached. They will get a little white at the bases. It's going to happen. It always happens. So to fix that later on, when we go to seal it, we're going to go ahead and also stain the base and kind of blend it in with the rest of the coloration, because there's going to be white around the edges here. So we'll just take some stain, Q-tip, just blend it all in, and it'll look like it never got bleached. Okay, so we now have the antlers wrapped nicely in duct tape and saran wrap, and we just put it in the solution of 1 gallon hydrogen peroxide, the rest water. What the percentage of hydrogen peroxide to water is, I don't really know. There's probably a good 3 gallons of water on top of that gallon, so you do the math. Anyway, we're going to bring it up to a simmer and keep it there for about 10 minutes, and then we'll pull it out and let it dry off. Alright, so it's been about 15 minutes since it started simmering. I did check it and it was a little yellow, so I put it back in for another 5 minutes, and here it is. As soon as it dries, as it starts drying, it'll whiten up and look more normal. But right now we want to hurry up and get this off. That way, if there's any water up in here, it doesn't stay there and continue to stain the antlers. We want to preserve those as much as possible. So I'm going to go ahead, take those off, and I'm going to set it on the table so it can dry for a few days, and we'll be back to seal it and stain the antlers. Alright, so it's been a couple days now, and it's had time to dry out. It's got a nice white sheen to it. It's pretty solid. There's not really any discoloration anywhere. It's all about the same whiteness. I did go ahead and take super glue and glued this nose piece back because it was coming apart. Glued these nose pieces on as well as glued all these teeth into place. If you look real closely, you really can't see any of that. You just got to control the amount of super glue that you use. Just make sure it's not too much. I use the gel glue, super glue, because it's best for porcelain, which is kind of what it's pretty much the closest consistency to bone material. So, and gel's better than the regular super glue on that. So now that we have it all dried out, there was a little bit of discoloration around the bottom of the antlers, a little bit, especially on the edges of each of these little bumps. It's all white now when it was really dark. So I'm going to go ahead and take the closest color stain that I could find, which I just happen to have. It's pretty close to what was already on there. And I'm going to take a Q-tip and dip it in just slightly and start going around all the spots where I think needs to be darker. After I get that done, I'll come back and I will seal out the skull, and that way it allows time for the stain to set in before I try and seal in the antlers. Alright, so we got the base of the antlers all stained up. It's all blended into the antlers. It looks a little bit darker at the bottom because it's wet, so it doesn't look like it's really blended right now, but it is. We're going to go ahead and let that dry, and while we do that, we're going to seal the skull. What you're going to need is some Mop and Glow, specifically this right here. You can find this at Walmart, other convenience stores. What's so special about this or how it works, I'm not completely sure, but what I do know is that when you use a paintbrush and paint it under the skull, it gets in the pores and it seals it up. It keeps in the smell or gets rid of the smell, one of the two, and it prevents dust from settling on it. It'll help keep moisture in and help it keep the skull from cracking. So we're gonna go ahead, take this little bowl of Mop and Glow, and we're gonna paint the skull. While I do that, we're gonna let this dry, and if it's not dry by the time we get done sealing the skull, we're gonna go ahead and take a blow dryer to it. That way it'll dry so we can go ahead and seal the antlers. Alright, so I went ahead and coated the skull with Mop and Glow. I actually did 2 coats. I let the first coat kind of dry, and then I used a blow dryer to finish drying it, as well as drying the stain on the antlers. And then after I let it set for about 15-20 minutes, I went ahead and took the Mop and Glow to the antlers, and it's about dry right now. I'm not going to touch the antlers, but this is the finished product. You don't have to use the Mop and Glow on the antlers, but I do, just because it adds a nice sheen to it. It accentuates the dark lines going through the antlers, and it just provides for a better overall look. Alright, so that's the end of the video. I hope you find it useful, and if you liked it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Instagram. So have a good day, and God bless.